No, thank you. Today is a tragic day called Erev Shabbos Kodesh Parshas Chukas. And the reason why it's a tragic day, it was the day where all of the Svarim were burnt. There was a massive Svarim burn in Paris. Yeah, it happened in Paris. It happened in front of the Louvre. And the legend has it, the Minchas HaLoser said over that, you know that long Tosfos, Vava Kama, and Daf Pei Vov, Hora Matama Tumas Eichlin Hoil V'Hoisel Sasha Kosher. That's the name, that's the line. And the whole Daf is just a Tosfos. So the legend has it that Tosfos was written the night before this terrible tragedy. And it was all the Baalei Tosfos who were during the time of the Baalei Tosfos, that 1200 period of time. And it was a tragic time. So they found, as like a simon, the Targum says on Zois Chuksa Torah, says Da Udin the Rice or something, and that's the fate of the Torah. They took that as a remiss that was supposed to happen. But it was a horrible, tragic time. And for some reason, is they don't keep the yahrzeit as the day of the month. I think it's a test, but it's always based on the Erev Shabbos Kodesh Parshas Chukas. Okay, so yesterday we learned about the halacha that if one sells an evet to Chutz La'aretz or to a goy, either way it's going to diminish the mitzvahs that the evet is going to do. The knas is that it goes free. So we first discussed that a get shicher would be required. Then we discussed what level of giving ownership to a goy is going to trigger this knas. If you use the evet as a mashkin, will it trigger the knas? The Gemara Lemaskana said, it will. It will, even if it was loy matas money, even if the mashkin was not yet seized. There's a different pshat in Rashi or Tosfos, but even if the mashkin was not seized yet, the fact that the evet is maybe living by the goy, the fact that the evet is going to be transferred to the goy is enough to trigger the knas. There was even a tzad to say that even if they were never mamashkin the evet, made a deal that if I don't pay by a certain date, we will be mamashkin the evet, and the date passes, and the loiva doesn't pay back to the goy the malva, that also triggers such a knas. Then we were discussing, what if it was not a mashkin, but the goy who was owed money seized the evet? The Gemara had a shaila if that would also be mechayv a knas because he didn't pay back. Then there was the question of an evet who was taken to the melachas hamelach. Then the Gemara had a series of shailas. What if someone is only sold for 30 days? What if he sells it he sells the evet for 30 days? So these were all the different shailas that were asked. If he was sold to a ger toshiv, if he was sold chutz malachto, he was sold chutz the mitzvahs. These are all sales with carve-outs to protect him from being over averis and allow him to do mitzvahs. Would these also trigger a knas? The Gemara ends up only paskening one, and that is if you sell to a ger toshiv, it's like you sell to a goy. Then the Gemara discusses another story. An evet was seized by goyim. There's no way you're going to get it back, but they want to pay you for it. Is there a problem taking the money? So Rabbi Yirmiyah told Rabbi Zreika, you better go to the Agur at night and pull out a Masifta Gemara to look up what the halacha was, right? He go look up the Mishnah, this is what he said, and you have to go out to look up Mishnah because most people were expected to having remembered those Mishnahs. And we brought a raya, in fact, that you would be able to accept the money. That's how we paskin halachamashi. You would be able to accept the money. Then we have the question of how much you force the adain to pay to buy the evet back from the goy. Is it 100 times? Is it unlimited? Is it 10 times? And the Gemara discussed it until the shaynis and compared it to selling a behema gasa to a goy, where once again there was a discrepancy between two Lashonis as to whether or not you have to buy it back for 10 times its value or for even 100 times its value. Then we had a shayla: does the knas pass on to the child? The Gemara resolves it and says that the knas does not pass down to the child. The Gemara resolved it from episodes of where someone violated Shemitah, where we saw that the knas does not pass down to a child. Then we had the discussion of Hezek Shei Nicker, Matamat Tahiris. Again, that's something that if someone does a Hezek Shei Nicker, he's chayav to pay out a knas. But if he dies, we do not make the children pay. And once again, that's only if there's an estate. The child surely does not have to pay with his own money. The question is, does the child have to pay with the estate's money? Then there was a discussion of selling with chutz la'aretz. When you're selling with chutz la'aretz, you're selling to a yid. If you sell a chutz la'aretz, the Gemara tells us that who has to free the eved? The rabbi sheni, which would indicate that the sale is a valid sale, and therefore the moicher gets to keep his money. And the loser here is the person who bought it, because he is forced to free. He is forced to free the eved. And then the Gemara was assessing what's considered selling to chutz la'aretz. So if you sell to someone from chutz la'aretz in Eretz Yisrael, is that considered selling to chutz la'aretz? So the Gemara says it ultimately depends on if this fellow from chutz la'aretz has an apartment in Israel or not. If he has an apartment in Israel, well then, the intent originally when it was sold was that it would stay in Israel. If later on the buyer decides to move, there's no consequence for that. Okay, and the last thing we were discussing was a ben baba who married an isha from Eretz Yisrael. Now, normally the nechasim of an isha come to the baal. He eats the payers of those nechasim. So if a ben Babel marries a woman from Eretz Yisrael and they're planning to live in Babel, is that considered like the woman sold these avodim that were part of her nechasim to a person from Eretz Yisrael? So the Gemara remained with a suffix on that, because there's a question: what level of ownership transfers to the husband? He only has the schus to eat payers. He doesn't have the schus to keep the item itself, and therefore there's a discussion whether or not that's considered a sale. But the Gemara says even if he has a right to keep the nechasim themselves, it should their marriage ever break up, nevertheless he's still only old payers. Amar Abavo. This is where we're up to now, which is 4 lines up in the thin lines on Daf Mem Dalet Amud Beis. Amar Abavo. Shana li Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan taught me. Eved sheyotza achar Rabbi l'Surya. An Eved who followed his owner to Surya. So he left Eretz Yisrael, but the Eved left willingly with his other. Umachrei sham Rabbi. And in Surya, the owner sold this Eved to somebody else. Yotza l'cheves. He goes free. Fragti Gemara, Tani Rab Chia, Ibed es chusay. Didn't Rab Chia say that once, this knas that an Eved goes free if he's sold to chutz la'aretz is a little bit of a benefit. It's a lot of bit of a benefit to the Eved. So if he willingly went from Eretz Yisrael to chutz la'aretz with his adain, now he no longer has that schus that if he sold there, he gets to walk free, because he already willingly went with his first owner to chutz la'aretz. So why is it that if the adain sold him there? Yes, he does. And we'll see in just a moment. He actually does. So loy kasha, kan shedas Rabbi Lachsor, kan she'ein das Rabbi Lachsor. If when they went down and he agreed to go down with his adain, the intent was they were going for a temporary basis and they were going to come back, and then he was sold to somebody who lives in chutz la'aretz, sure, he's entitled to compensation. Then he goes free. But what if when they moved to chutz la'aretz with his first adain, there was no intent of coming back, so then he lost his chutz. V'atanya, which is Rashi's b'nichusa, this proves our point. Yotzei ha'eved achar Rabbi l'Surya. The Eved goes with his adain to Surya. So before we continue this brisa that's going to prove our point, the Gemara interjects. What do you mean Yotzei? Yotzei sounds like he has to go. Yotzei, he must go with his adain. Are you telling me that he has to go? Exactly Duvi's question. But nan ve'ein hakoil moitziyin. You cannot force your Eved. If you want to move from Eretz Yisrael to chutz la'aretz, you cannot force your Eved to move with you. Ella, we need to change it from Yosy to Yotza. So Yotza Eved, if the Eved willingly followed his Adon to Chutz La'aretz, Yotza Eved Achar Rabbi L'Surya, Umach Rabbi Sham, and his Adon told him there, what the halacha, does he go free or not? Im das Rabbi Lachsor, if his Adon had intended to move back, meaning it was only a temporary move to Chutz La'aretz, Kayvin Oisai. Then if the Adon sells the Eved in Chutz La'aretz to someone who's permanently stationed in Chutz La'aretz, he's going to go free. Remain das Rabbi Lachsor. But if when the Adon originally went to Yisrael, went to Chutz La'aretz, it was known that he had no intention of moving back, it was a permanent move, then Ein Kayvin Oisai. Then if he sells it there, we do not free the Eved. Amar Avadim. Shamis Mineda Mar Shmuel Tarti. I actually heard two halachas from Shmuel. Chadahach. One halach is about an Eved going free if he sold to Chutz La'aretz. The Idach and the other halach I heard from Shmuel was the following. Nidmar. We know if you sell a field, you really only charge for the field the amount of money that it would be worth until Yovel, because everybody knows by Yovel the sale reverses. Well, what if the genius decided to sell the field on Yovel itself? Rav Amar Mechura v'Yotze. It's a good sale, and then at the end of Yovel it goes back, right? At the beginning of Yovel it goes back, or it goes back instantly. So, meaning what does it mean? Pashut shot in what a good sale is the $100,000 that I paid you for the field, you get to keep, and then you return the field to me. And then I return the field to you, which means the buyer loses. It's not a sale, meaning I get my money back. Thank you very much, Chaim. So these two halachas I heard, Bechada Hadrizvini, by one of these two halachas, I learned that what Shmuel Paskin was that there's no sale at all, and the buyer gets his money back. And in the other one, I heard that Shmuel said that the buyer does not get his money back. Does the buyer get his money back when he buys an Eved in Eretz Yisrael, from Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz, or does the buyer get his money back by the purchase during Yovel? Now, if you look at the pashtus of the words of Shmuel, it sounds like Eidim Mechur Kalikr that he gets his money back. But Reb Anan had a suffix. What exactly was it that Shmuel said? So Amar Yosef, let's use a process of elimination. If I can prove what Shmuel holds in one of these two cases, that by the process of elimination, I'll know what he held in the other case. Nechzianam. Miditani v'braisa. The Braisa says, HaMoicher Abdu l'chutz la'aretz Yotza l'cheres v'tzarech get shicher may Rabbi Sheni. That's what it says in our Braisa. Who gives him the get shicher? The Rabbi Sheni. Doesn't that prove that the sale is valid? The Rabbi Sheni will not get his money refunded because it was a final sale, and now he frees him. So if that's the case by Eved, where the Lekech does not get his money back, Shemamina, Kanya, Rabbi Sheni, right? We see that in the case of Eved, the sale is valid. Therefore, B'chiyamar Shmuel Hasam Ein Mechura, and therefore when Shmuel said by Yovel, he said Ein Mechura Kalikr, what it means is Umas Chayzrin, and that the Lekech gets his money back. Simple, it's a simple process of elimination. Why couldn't Reb Anan figure this out? This wasn't so complicated. Because he didn't hear of this brisa that says by an Eved that the Rabbi Sheni is the one that frees the Eved. Why don't you midaik from the words of Shmuel itself? Like we pointed out, it's no sale at all. Doesn't that indicate no sale at all, meaning that the Lekech should get his money back? No. From those words alone that Shmuel said, you would not have known that the Lekech gets his money back. When Shmuel said Ein Mechura Kol Iker, who said it means Lagabi that the Lekech gets his money back? Dilma Ein Mechura Umois Matana. Maybe what it means is that since he bought something that he knows he can't buy, we look at it like he was giving a matana. Midi da moish matana ninu. The moish will be moish matana. Midi da hava, and you find such a concept that if someone enters into a transaction and it's clear to everybody that this transaction has no validity, we'll say it's a veiled attempt at giving someone a gift without outright saying you're giving him a gift. For instance, if someone is Makadish your sister, everybody knows you cannot be Makadish your sister. The Idmar, Makadish is a Chayzoy, Rav Omar Mois Chayzun, Ushmul Omar Mois Matana. Shmuel says, Avada, he knew that he can't be Makadish your sister, but he didn't want to humiliate her by giving her a gift, so he made believe like he's doing a Kedushin, so it should look less as a gift to her. So therefore, maybe that's what Shmuel would have meant over here. So therefore, you needed to know clearly what Shmuel said by Eved, that the sale is valid, and by process of elimination, we know that when it comes to Yovel, the sale is not valid. Amar le Abaye le Rabbi Yosy. My chazos to continue lekech. In the case of the Eved, you were not allowed to sell from Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz. So they both did something wrong. The seller did something wrong, and the buyer did something wrong. Why does the seller get stuck holding the bag? My chazos to continue lekech. Niklas elemocher. Amalei, he told him, Lav achbar ganev. When the mouse steals your cheese, he's not really the ganev. Because he's only able to do it because it was facilitated by the hole that the achbar can escape into. Elachur ganev. If it wasn't for the facilitator, the achbar could never have stolen. So sure, the Malva did the avla, but I could have never done the avla. I couldn't have sold if there's no buyer. Amalei. So Rabbi Yosef, so Abaye answered right back. We'll look at it from the other perspective. Ilav achbra, if there's no ganeb, churaminole, the hole would not have been a facilitator. Zokt Gemara, you're right. There's an argument in either direction. Mistabra heicha de iki yisura hasam gansinam. You know, someone once asked a bank robber, "Why did you rob the bank for?" So he says, "Because." So the robber answered, "Because that's where the money is, right? You look where the money is, and that's where the knas is placed." There's a term in addiction called enabler. An enabler. An enabler, the guy who's drunk and doesn't show up to work, his wife who calls the boss and says, "Oh, my husband can't make it to work today because he's not feeling well," so she's covering up for him. That's called the enabler. So this is mamish what this is. It's the chura. The chura is the enabler. And it's mamish the enabler because it enables someone to cover up his crimes after the fact. It's called an accessory to a crime after the fact. Yeah. Okay. As a matter of fact, I'm sure everyone heard of Rudolf Kastner. Rudolf Kastner, ultimately, he was pinned because in Israel there's a law that being an accessory to the crime of killing Jews during the Second World War was also a crime. Even if you're an accessory to the crime after the fact, which means if you help the Nazi escape in any way, shape, or form, that was punishable by death in Israel. And that's exactly what they caught Rudolf Kastner with. His own document showed that he advocated on behalf of one of the big Nazis, and he wrote in his own documents, "This fellow was saved due to my personal intervention." And it was that document that they found amongst his own documents that he submitted for discovery carelessly without reading through what he was giving to court. That's how they caught him. Hahu Abda, the Arak mechutz la'aretz. He ran away. He escaped his Adoin in chutz la'aretz, and he ran to Eretz. He went to Eretz Yisrael. Also, Morei Abasrei. So his owner came to Eretz Yisrael to pursue and retrieve his Eved. Also, the Kamei de Rabami. They went to Rabami. Amalei Rabami told him, "Here is the deal. You're not getting this Eved back. So let's make a deal so you can get your skin back." Amalei nichtov loch shtar adame. We will write a star for the value of this Eved that the Eved will owe you, but the chasav la'gita de cherusa. But we want you to free the Eved so that the Eved can remain in Eretz Yisrael. The Eloi, if you don't want to do that, mafkan elei minoch, we'll just take the Eved away from you. We'll just seize the Eved, you get nothing. So here's your choice. Either free the Eved and we'll pay you, or the Eved will be free and you won't get a penny. Why do I have a right to do that? We do have Achi Rabbi Yoshia. Because of a shatter of Achi Rabbi Yoshia learned from the Pasuk, which almost makes it a deraisa. And this will be a very interesting limud. We're going to take a couple of cracks at explaining this pasuk, and then we're going to come out with a pshat. The Tanya we learned. Very interesting pasuk. Lo yeshvu b'artzecha. Let's look at the pasuk inside because we're going to be spending some time on this pasuk. Lo yeshvu b'artzecha pen yachtiu ois choli ki savoid es Elohayim yilach alomayim. It's not good for them to stay in your land. Get rid of the goyim. Get rid of the goyim. It's not good to keep them there. Yochel ba'ovid kechavim shekibul alav shaloi labud abad yizara hakasav medaber. You might have thought that what is the pasuk talking about? If you come in there to Israel and the guy says, "I'm not going to do abad yizara," that's the person who should be lo yeshvu b'artzecha. Get rid of those because they're ultimately going to be a bad influence. Talmud Loimer, it says in the pasuk, "Lo saskir eved el adoinav asher yinotze le'lecha ma'im adoinav." Matakana, what should you do? My takana, what should you do? Imcha yeshev b'kirbach. So this is the interesting pasuk that we're going to be focused on. Lo saskir eved el adoinav. Let's learn before we see the Gemara's drushes. Let's just understand the pasuk shot of the pasuk. It says, "Lo saskir eved el adoinav." Don't lock up an eved to its owner. Asher yinotze le'lecha. This fellow came to you. He came to escape to you. The Ramban says, pasuk shot in this pasuk is, if you're in the middle of fighting a war with the enemy, and one of the slaves that belong to one of the enemy comes to you and says, "I want to change loyalties. I want to abandon my master, and I want to become an eved to you Jews," don't give him back. Don't lock him up to his adon. Don't give him back. Rather, imcha yeshev b'kirbacha, let him live and remain with you. Don't chaper him. That could be an extra isser, but I'll call upon him. The Ramban says that's what it's referring to. The Ramban says there's two reasons why you should not give him back. Reason number one is because if he wants to become a Ben Aliyah and be Makabel Mitzvahs, Keisha, because he knows what he's getting into, so you have to give him that opportunity. But the other reason the Ramban says is very strategic. One of the best sources of intelligence is an insider. So here you have an Eved who knows what's going on in the bowels of the enemy. He's a good person to have on your team, and that's a great strategy to get insiders. So that's how. I'm sorry. So that's the pasuk shot of the pasuk. Now we're going to see how the Gemara darshans the pasuk. Now, if it's pasuk pshat that you're taking the Eved, l'sasker Eved el adoinov, imcha yeshev b'kirbecha, if that's what it means, we have a problem. The kosher Rab Achi bar Yoshia. Hi asher yinotze lelecha. Asher yinotze lelecha. Oh, I think I skipped. The kosher Rab Yoshia. Hi me'im adoinov. What do you mean me'im adoinov? It's me'im elikov. Either it's elikov or me'im ava me'boile. You're going to be the Adon. He's running away from his nation. So what does it mean? What does it mean? Ma'im Adonov. It's not Ma'im Adonov. It's Ma'im Aviv. In other words, don't. What does it say? He's coming to you from his owner. He's coming to you from his nation, from his family. That's what the point should be. So that's why he doesn't like Pasuk Pshat in the Pasuk. The pasuk is trying to send us another message. What it's talking about is it's speaking about someone who sold his eved to chutz la'aretz hakasav v'daber. So now you know what he's getting at, right? We're trying to say that there's a pasuk that tells you that you're not allowed to send an eved from Eretz Yisrael to chutz la'aretz. And if you do, don't connect him to his second Odin. He's got to go back to Eretz Yisrael. But if that, or maybe a guy who wants to become an Eved, maybe not even an Eved. We're talking about a Yid who's selling his Eved Kanani to Chutz La'aretz. So let's read the pasuk. Don't lock him up to his second Odin. Asher yinotze le'lecha. Yinotze means to run away. Yinotze le'lecha, we will run away to you. You run away from you, not to you. Right here, he's running away from you. So the kosher Rab Acha bar Yoshia. Hi asher yinotze le'lecha, asher yinotze me'imcha miboyle. So once again, this type doesn't fit in so good either. Ella Amar Bacha Bayoshia, we're talking about something else. We're talking about the Evet Sheborach Mechutz La'aretz Akasim V'daber. And this is exactly this case that came in front of Reb Ami. We have an Evet who ran away from his Adon in Chutz La'aretz, and he came to Eretz Yisrael. And then what it's saying is, L'sasker Evet L'Adonov, don't lock him up. Don't lock him up to his Adon. In other words, let him be free from his Adon in Chutz La'aretz. Asher Yinotze Elecha, what does that mean? Yinotze Elecha means he's running to you for refuge. He's running away from you. So Rashi has to interject that Yinotzel maybe has a different meaning. And what it means is Shebarach mechutz la'aretz, dahainu asher yinotzel elecha la'aretz. That so it's referring to the person who he's going to. He's escaping to Eretz Yisrael to get away from the Adon that's in Chutz La'aretz. Okay, the Evet Shebarach mechutz la'aretz hakadosh v'daber. So okay. So I'll call upon him. This is why Rabbi Ami said, according to this shot in the pasuk, you don't get to go back. So therefore, I have a source in the pasuk that he's free. You can't put him back. Do yourself a favor and at least get the IOU note, so maybe you'll get some money back. Tani Yidich l'sask Eved l'Adoinav, Rabbi Yomer v'lekech Eved al manas l'shacharei hakadosh v'daber. It's referring to something else. It's referring to somebody who buys an Eved with the intent to free the Eved. Hey Chidami, what is exactly the transaction? Amar Nachman Yitzchak, the Kasav Lei Hachi. He wrote a star to the Eved before he bought the Eved. Likisha ekhecha, when I purchase you, Harei atzma kanu l'chame achshav. Of course, this involves Adam Moicha Davar Shalei B'Laylam, but according to Reb Meir, that Adam Moicha Davar Shalei B'Laylam, he's prior to purchasing an Eved, he's freeing the Eved Me'achshav. And that's what it's talking about. L'sasker Eved l'Adoinav, don't lock an Eved to his Adam, if he freed him in advance. Okay, developing. Zok to Gemara. So there's only one pshat that learns that the Eved gets to go free if he escapes from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael. And according to that pshat is why Rabbi Ami wanted to let the Eved go free. Rab Chisda Oracle Abda Levekutoy. Rab Chisda, his Eved ran away to Bekutoy. Rashi says that Rab Chisda lived in Chutz La'aretz and Bekutoy was in Chutz La'aretz. So all this happened in Chutz La'aretz. One of his avodim ran away. Sholach Lahu, he sent to the Kutim, you have custody of my Eved. Hadru in the heli, be so kind, send me back my Eved. Sholchulei, the Kutim sent him back. The pasuk says we don't have to give it back. Lo yisasker Eved l'Adoinav. Never lock an Eved to his other. So they learned, pshat in the pasuk means never give back an Eved that escapes. Sholach Lahu, Abaye, I'm saying, Reb Chizda sent back to them, are you Kutim? Pusha the touch and chimish versteist. I understand you don't listen to Chazal, but you have to at least listen to the pasuk, and you're not even listening to pasuk pshat in the pasuk. You know what the pasuk is referring to? Hu be'eved shebarach mechutz la'aretz la'aretz. Uchad Rabbi Acha Rabbi Yosy. Like Rabbi Acha Rabbi Yosy learned, it's speaking about eved shebarach mechutz la'aretz Yisrael. That's what it's talking about. Don't give back. But we're in Babel. We're both in Babel. We're both in chutz la'aretz. Give it back to me. Now we had multiple ways to understand the pasuk. Why did Rabbi Chisda decide to quote Rabbi Acha Bar Yoshi's pshat to the Kutim? Why didn't he pick the last pshat that it's speaking about? Right? Why did he pick this pshat? Because it's the most poshut way to touch the pasuk from all of them pshatim, and he knew the Kutim only stick the pasuk pshat. Abai once lost a donkey, and the donkey he saw by the Kutim. So he sent to the Kutim, Shadruli, would you be so kind and return my donkey? They told him back, Shalach Simna, send us a simon that it's yours, and then we'll send it back. The Chivra, crazy, it has a white belly. They sent him back, that's not a good simon. But we know a Talmud Chacham gets his gets his Avedis back, sign. If he merely recognizes it, we trust him that he knows what he's talking about, and we'll give it back to him, even if he doesn't have a simon, which proves to us that it's his. As long as he proves to himself that it's his, we trust him. So they sent him back, Ilav de Nachmaniat, if you weren't Abaye, who's so holy and choshev and trustworthy, we would not have given it back to you, because your simon with a white belly is not much of a simon. All donkeys have white bellies, so that's not much of a simon. This is a fascinating sugya. I hope I'll have time to elaborate a little bit. You're not allowed to redeem a shavui who's worth more for more than what it would normally be worth. There are those who say more than what they would charge ransom for a goyish captive. The Gemara is going to discuss what the tikkun olam is, but the pashup shot is that if goyim see that Jews spend a lot of money to redeem their avodim, their price goes up. It becomes an industry. You don't help people who are in captivity. You don't help them escape. Possibly. We're going to have to see what this means. Being that we're running late, I just want to throw out two tidbits, fascinating tidbits. We're going to see in the Gemara today, and in Tosfos, that you're not allowed to redeem people for more than they're worth because of what I said. But we're going to see there's a carve out for Talmidei Chacham. Talmidei Chachamim, Tzadikim, there's an unlimited scale of what you could pay. So on that note, we know the famous story, the famous Shabbat that we know about is the Maram Rutenberg. This was in the 11 or 1200 during the period of Rishonim. The Russia King Rudolph wanted to lock him up. He escaped from Germany to France, and he was on his way to Eretz Yisrael, and they ended up getting him, and they locked him up for 7 years. Many people wanted to redeem him. He was the God Lador. The Maram Rutenberg wrote more tshuvas than anybody else. He was the God Lador. Ad Kedekach, being that he didn't do anything illegal, he was merely a political prisoner. In fact, he was allowed visitors. He was locked up there, but people would come. He wrote many tshuvas for him in prison. And he was there for 7 years, and he refused to be redeemed. Why? Because he didn't want King Rudolph to start making a business out of it. And even after he died, they wouldn't redeem him. And his body was kept there for 14 years till a very wealthy German Jew wanted to bail him out for an incredible amount of money. He said, I'm doing it, Amanas, that I should be buried near Maram Rottenberg. And in fact, in the Worms cemetery, this Yid, I forgot what his name was, I think a place was Zusha Vippin or something, he is buried directly next to Maram Rottenberg. We don't have too many kfarim that we know that we could identify as the kfarim of Rishonim, but we have Maram Rottenberg, one of the greatest Rishonim that lived. The Maharshal asked a big kasha on the Maram Rottenberg. How could you stop people from being paid to you? We learned in Tosfos, I mean, he was a Tosfos, he was a Baal Tosfos, but we know for a fact that for a Talmud Chacham, there's no limit. So how could you stop it? So the Marshal ended up saying, but Lamaisa the Maram Rottenberg knew exactly what he was talking about, because he knew, Rahmanul Islam, that this would become a business. And the proof is in the pudding, that after the Maram Rottenberg, not ever was a Rishon ever captured for ransom. And as a matter of fact, while the Maram Rottenberg was in jail, there was an attempt to capture the Rosh, but he got out by the skin of his teeth. So the Marshal says, halacha hin, halacha her, avada the halacha is he would be allowed to. But the Maram Rottenberg was moishe nefesh his life and after his death, because he wanted to kill this entire avenue of Soros. And he was successful about it. So the biggest right that he was right is that it worked. Right? The Yasla Botim, the biggest vote of confidence in the revolution makes what you do work. That's he didn't put any chasnas. That's one interesting story. The other interesting story is Rav Hutner was in one of the planes that was hijacked by the Arabs and landed in the desert in Jordan. Right? I think it was a Jordan desert or was it a Syrian desert? It was a desert. Anybody remember where it was? Was it Jordan or Syria? Jordan. And at the time, they asked Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, probably Inga Manchik at the time, they asked him, well, Rav Hutner, we have to ransom him no matter what the cost is. So Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky says you're not allowed to give a penny Not allowed to give a penny for a putter. Why? He says, all of our discussion is during normal times. Shas Milchama, every penny, ever since 1948, he said, ever since Israel took over, every penny that you're going to give to the Arabs, all they're going to do is use it to kill you. So therefore, you're not allowed to be paida, even for one penny, because you're not allowed to give them anything, because all you're doing is helping. So in a normal case, where it's a question of if they're going to want to ransom you more, make money, that's one thing. Wartime, and he says until the Arabs go away and there's zero terrorism, you're never ever allowed to pay one penny, because every penny you give them is going to go to buy weapons to kill you. What is the tikkun olam that we're talking about? Is it mishum beduchta the tziburu? You don't want to burden the tzibur, or maybe it's so that the goyim shouldn't make an industry out of it. Toshma to Levi bar Dagra harka lebarte betleiser alpha dinnerzo. He redeemed his daughter for an absorbent a huge amount. Omar Abaye said, so you have a raya that it can't be because it's going to give the goyim an appetite. It must be because you can't burden the tzibur. But if he wants to pay his own money, he's entitled to. Dr. Mar, no, you don't have a raya. Uman leim alon the baratzu chachamim of it. Who said he did the right thing? Maybe he did the wrong thing. So you don't have a raya. Dil b'shalei baratzu chachamim of it. So it remains a subject. What is the reason why they made this takana? You're not allowed to help people escape. What's the difference? The leka elachad. The question is, if there's multiple captives and you help one or two escape, what's going to change about the treatment to the remaining? They're going to be locked down. They're going to be chained. They're going to be put into a much more severe situation. So by you helping some of these escape, you're going to make the situation much worse for everybody else. That's takanos shvuyin. Tikkun olam is you should never help any hostages escape, because then the next time they take hostages, it's going to be even worse. Or if there's hostages in any other place, they're going to lock them down even further. So that is the difference. If it's al tikkun olam, you never help any hostages. If it's only because of the tikkun of those shvuyin, then you don't help some of those hostages. And Tebi, I guess, was an exception to that rule. I don't know if they asked a Pesach about it. Bante de Rav Nachman, Bachshan Kadra Biyadai. The daughters of Rav Nachman were seemingly so holy, they were able to stir. Yeah, but what about other hostages elsewhere? Like, that would cause that other hostages will be treated. So I'm not sure how that worked. Bante de Rav Nachman, Bachshan Kadra Biyadai. They seem to be very holy people. They were able to stir cooking pots with their bare hands without even using a utensil. I guess in those days, if I saw nowadays you see someone stirring a pot with his own hands, I don't know if I would want to eat it. Then there's a shaila: are there blias from a live piece of meat? Will there be blias? So that's a shaila. But whatever the case is, Kasher Leila Rav Ilish. This is a famous Rav Ilish. Kasher Leila Rav Ilish. Rav Ilish he looked at it a little funny. That's a little over the top. This is showing sigrois amoifis. Idei ayid a tzaddik, or every day is a pai tzaddik. Let's see. Ksipi said, I don't understand. Adam echad me elef matzasi. The Navi tells us, David HaMelech says, I found 1 out of 1,000 who could be a holy tzaddik. V'isha b'chalela limati. You'll never find women who are that holy. So is this for real? Or is this some type of scam? I ha'ika bante de Rav Nachman. You see that these girls are miraculous. As things happened, he ended up being taken captive together with them. So he was there in jail with them. One day, someone sitting in jail near Rab Ilish, he was able to understand what birds say. Also, a raven came along, Vika Karile, and was talking to his buddy. Amalei Maika Amar. So he asked, Ilish asked his buddy, what is this raven saying? Amalei, Ilish Barach, Ilish Barach, Ilish run away, Ilish run away. The raven is telling you to escape. Amar, he said, Urva Shakrahu. A raven is a liar. I'm not going to trust him. I'm not going to trust him. Adahachi Asa Yoina. Then a dove came, Vikakari, and was also talking to this man. Amalei Maika Amra. He asked again his buddy, what is it saying? Amalei Ilish Brach, Ilish Brach. So he said, Amar, Knesset Yisrael ki yoina mesiva. Knesset Yisrael is compared to a yoina. Shemami no, misrachesh linisa. If I'm getting such a message, there'll probably be a nace that will help me escape. Amar, he said, before I go, I'm not going to abandon these girls. Let me see how they're doing. Also, Achsi, Bante de Rav Nachman, Ikaimon behem nesayu. If they're Taka Erlicha girls, they're holy, Ahadrinil. I'll stay back or I'll take them with me. Omar, how do I find out what women are thinking? Noshi kol mili de islahu sadrun al-dadi bevesekisi. Where do they have private conversations with each other? When they're in the washroom, they have these discussions because they assume that they have privacy. Oh, they have to talk because otherwise there could be Shema'inu. So we heard the Kamran Adi Govern. These captors are our husbands. Obviously, they were being abused. Unahardai governed, and the tzaddikim of Naharda, where we come from, they're also our husbands. You know what? I want to tell our captors, let's get out of here. Let's move far away. So that they don't find out that we're here, and they'll redeem us, and then we're going to go back to our Jewish husbands. We like the goyim that we're with. We like our captors. There's a certain syndrome. What's that syndrome called? When you want your Stockholm syndrome. But he saw that they weren't erlich. They were happy. They liked these guys better than their real husbands. So he saw they weren't kosher. So he said, you know what? I'm leaving them in jail. I'm out of here. Come, Arak, he ran away. Asa'yu, Vahu Gavra. And the fellow who was the bird translator came along with him. Lididei Yisrachish Lanisa. He had a nace over B'maver. He got right over the river, so they couldn't get him. Gabra, the other guy, didn't make it to the boat on time. As we say, he missed the boat. Ashkechu, they were able to capture him, but they killed him. He Hadron, when he came back to the community, Rabilish, V'asan, Amar, he said, Hava Kabakshan Kidubik Shafin. They were not holy girls. How is it possible that they stirred the pot with their own hands? It must be, it was kishah. So there's a fascinating lesson here that everybody tumbles about. Rabbi Kiva Eger brings down an orach here, a fascinating stickle. And Rabbi Kiva Eger, this is going to be Nagaya, this week's parsha. It's Lubrinius text again, Parshas Balak. So let's have a look. But orach, let me ask you a question. If I ask you point blank, you heard the story. Did Rabbi Elish understand what Bur's saying? No, he needed a guy to tell him. Zok the orach. Orach heavy bisugizu. Your village yoda sichas oipos. Your orach brings your eye from here that your village did understand birds. It's masha pukvager. They didn't understand. Zog from Chaim Shmulevitz on this week's parsha. Unbelievable. Let me ask you a question. You learned the psukim in Poland. Was it pretty clear that the Rebbeinu Shalom didn't want Bilam to go curse Klal Yisrael? It was pretty clear. But Bilam at the Zoygavold guy, he has such a personal gear. It's an angeret that Hashem wants him to go. Because a person could fool himself to believe anything when it's relative to him. Zokt the Heilige Reb Chaim Shmulevitz. Reb Elish didn't trust the Oirev because he was afraid it was like a trap, he'll get caught. So he's going to believe the Arab sitting beside him, that the Arab is going to, the Arab could have made up the whole story, I heard it from the birds. So why would he put his life in the Arab's hand? Obviously, Rabbi Elish did understand the birds. So why did he need the Arab to tell it for him? He says, because when you're in jail and you want out, it's like seeing a mirage. Maybe since it's relative to myself, I'm going to understand it wrong because of my negiyas. Therefore, he asked the Arab. So for Karet, the fact that he listened to the Arab about the Yoina was a ride that he did understand, because there's no way he would have trusted the Arab. But what you see from Rabbi Elish's Gemara from Chaim Shulevitz is that when you come to yourself, you can look at black as white and white as black and night as day and day as night, because a person is biased towards himself and he could never ever have an objective opinion about himself. Thus is the chiddush from Chaim about Rabbi Elish. Okay, I have 1 minute left and I'm very, very behind.
I thought you were going to say this is not a good fundraising Gemara for Yad La'achim.
Okay, gewaltig. Sagt der Heilige Gemara. Sagt der Mishnah weiter. If a guy is peddling svarim, you don't buy it from them. If they want more than what it's really valued at. Amarle Rav Budja or Ravashi. Yeser al domain hu dein loy. You're telling me that if they're asking an absorbent amount, then you don't buy it. Ha b'chtei demain, but for its proper value, like Shemami na Sefer Torah shouldn't be out of the chavim karin boy. You see that a Sefer Torah that's fine by a guy, you can read it. And oibazoi, you have a raya that you don't have to worry that it's a Sefer Torah shekosvei min, which means you have to burn it. So Gemara dilmali games. We're not saying that it's for sure a kosher Sefer Torah. You can't use it, but you can't burn it. If it's a Sefer Torah shekosvei min, you have to burn it. If it's not, you're not allowed to burn it. So what are you supposed to do? You should make an iza just in case. Amar Nachman, Naktina, we learned Sefer Torah shekosvei min yisarei. Min is Rosh Tevis, mitalmidei shel yeshay hanoitri. Christian. What if a guy wrote it? Not a min, just a regular guy. So a min is like a priest. A regular guy is just a regular person. Yigane. That's a suffix. Nimsa biyad min yiganes. Nimsa biyad Ovid Kechavim. Amrila yiganes. Amrila karin by. Those who hold, you could even learn in it. So Nachman. Amar Nachman. Naktinu we learned Sefer Torah shekosvei min yisarev. Kosvei Ovid Kechavim yiganes. But nimsa biyad min. You only found it by him, but you don't see that he actually wrote it. There to Yiganis. But if you only found it by the Chavim, Amala Yiganis, Amala Karin, by there are those who even hold you're allowed to read it. So if it goes over the Chavim, Tanya Chadi, sorry if we learned one Bryce that says you burn it, Tanya Idich Yiganis, you hide it, but Tanya Idich Karin, but you can actually read it. So these are three-way machlokes. It's like kasha. It's not a stira. How did Tanya Yisarif, Rebbe Lezer, he's going according to Rebbe Lezer who holds, even though he's a regular guy, he's not a min, you have to assume everything he does l'shem avodah zarah. The Sefer Torah has to be burnt. But the Tanya Yiganis, and the Tana who holds Yiganis, Hi Tana, it's a different Tana. The Tanya Rabbi Nuna Bereder Rabbi Mipashlunya, Sefer Torah Tefillin Mezuzah Shekasvan Moiser Ovid Kechavim the Eved Isha Vekatan the Kusi the Yisrael Mumar Psulin it's possible, but you don't have to burn it. Shenemru Kshartem Uksavtem Kol Sheyeshne B'Kshira. If you're mechuyev in putting on tefillin, Yeshne B'Ksiva, you can write tefillin. So therefore, you make geniza, it's not kosher, but you don't burn it. And the third bride that says you actually can use it is Hai Tanu, the different Tanu, the Tanya Loichim Svarim and Chavim, B'chol Mokim. You're allowed to buy Svarim from Goyim anywhere, Ulvad, Shiyu, Ksuvin, Kilchosin, as long as they're written properly. Umaisa by Chavim Echad, B'tzidon. So your kosher Svarim, there was a Goy who was writing Svarim, the Hitter Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, Likach Mimenu. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel let people buy Svarim from a guy who was writing it. Right? The Gemara, Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, Ibid Lishman boy. It has to be done properly, but Ksiva Lishman loy boy. But you're telling me the Ksiva doesn't have to write. You have to prepare the hide properly. Everything has to look proper, but you don't have to be worried about the Ksiva Lishma. The Tanya we learned, Tzipon Zav, Oy Shatla Aleyan, or Behemet Tmeya. Either they covered the tefillin with gold, or they made up the casing of Or Behemet Tmeya. Shulai still be possible. Or Behemet Torah would be ksheris. The even though the working, the preparing of the cloth of the hide wasn't done l'shma. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel afilu ar behemet Torah psulois ad shiyab done l'shma. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel holds that even preparing the hide has to be l'shma. So think about it. If Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is so machmer that you have to even prepare the hide l'shma, surely you have to write it l'shma. So how could you say not? Rabbi Shmuel, you're right. You know what the case is over there? The ger shechazar l'sura. We're talking about a ger who knows to write l'shma because he was once a yid, but he happened to have become a goy again. He went off to there, so that's why it's good. If a guy who is a yid and he purposely turns back, he's the last guy to trust. He was an erlich guy. The reason why he started acting like a goy again is because they were going to kill him, the goyim, for becoming a heretic. But be'etim inside, he was an erlich person. That's why you could trust him, because we know it was written in Shema. Now we have a small, fascinating story, and then we'll stop. Tanya Rabbanan, ma'alim b'domain ad kidei terepik. You're allowed to pay up to a terepik. My terepik, how much is a terepik? Rabbi Sheshes is tira. It's a certain amount of money. Rashi gives the details of how much it is. I don't know what that is in today's money. Hayita Yosy, there was an Arab woman, the icy Chayosy, the tefillin, the kamei Abaye. She had a whole bag, a whole sack full of pairs of tefillin that she brought to Abaye. Abaye wanted to redeem it, but he didn't want to pay for it. He wanted to get it cheap and show her that she didn't find such a diamond that she could make money off. So Amalai told her, you have this reish betamri. For every pair of tefillin, I'll give you a date. So now she chapped that she didn't have something of value. She had something that was useless. So she got angry. Imal Yizihira, she got very upset. Shikla shatzinu b'nahara, and she threw the whole bag of tefillin into the river. Garun. Amar Abaya said, I should have offered her maybe 2 dates for each pair of tefillin. I shouldn't have offered it so low because that made her upset, and because of that, there was a zilzal for tefillin. Okay, we'll stop here. Tomorrow we're going to be learning 1 hour before mincha, and for Daniel Finkelshire, I'm starting a half hour early to try to catch them up because they're up to Mem Gimel Amar Aleph right now.